Mate, firstly, I guess what I'd love to just hear a little bit about from you is just a little bit of your background and how your background's shaped you, and then consequently you have shaped your cultures, and what do they look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't even know if I can really describe myself. That's pretty tough.
Maybe
To
I,
do
maybe I'll ask your wife, and that'll be a better gauge of
it.
what's going on.
No, I think we start at the beginning. I came from the Midwestern United States, which is a place that's known for humility and hard work and good people that help your neighbor, and you come with a real service mindset, and generally good people that support each other, live off each other. I always tell people, stories. You might trade carrots from your garden for somebody who'll take your recycling to the recycling center 20 miles away, and somebody will plow your driveway if you take care of their dog for the weekend. And that's kind of how I grew up. So
Yeah.
so that probably started, just my general thinking about how we approach things. And then went to university, study mathematics. It's computational mathematics major, and then
That sounds
got
heavy,
into
mate.
this there.
That sounds really heavy,
Yeah,
computational mathematics. There's a niche there,
yeah,
isn't there?
yeah. Yeah, no, it was definitely, I was one of the nerds in the nerdery, that's for sure, for 5 years.
Well, not to critique your nerdiness, but I don't know if the nerdery is a grammatically correct statement, Scott.
Yeah. It's math, not English. It's just no, it's good. So I went to school there, got in. That's when I fell in love with the sport and started rugby there. And then soon after graduating, I was in the professional world. I went to the consulting world and technology consulting, and decided I was going to take some time off and go play for a year abroad. And that's when I that's when I heard about a place where I could earn a few bucks to play in England. But I also did consulting, so I transferred and did lived and worked and played in the UK, and that was great. And then we came back to I came back to Atlanta to marry my wife, and that was she moved from the Midwest down to the South while I was gone, and so I chased her down here, and we came back and kind of fell into a program called Life University that actually lost its rugby program. The rugby program was on it was on the ropes, and we looked around and said, we need a coach. And I said, well, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And that kind of started the coaching journey. I was there for 13 years. Really, just really great people there. We built a wonderful program that's now a good collegiate program and club program there. And
Scott, were you injured?
yeah,
Were you injured to stop playing, or was it just time, or was coaching calling in that regard?
I was player coaching, which is, so I played for 4 years while I coached and worked, and um, so that's when I started to learn how to really have organizational scale. It was kind of weird, it was a bit strange. There was coaches that were working there. I was playing, I was coaching, I was working another job, and I actually stepped away from the technology industry and went to the university and said, "Hey, I'd really like to ramp up this program." And so they hired me there full time. I I also started working for USA Rugby in a high performance regional manager way. So I did that for about a year until the program was built to a point where I needed somebody that could take it and take it the last mile. And there was a guy by the name of Dan Payne that was a friend of mine. He became the CEO of USA Rugby later on. But Dan went to life, and then he just, he took it and ran with it. And so then, from there, I jumped into rep play and coached U20s. I kind of coached at the local university, and then um, until I got the call from a local businessman, and he said, "I need a partner in this MLR franchise called Rugby, and we're going to call it Rugby ATL." And so I jumped into that and became kind of part owner, general manager, head coach, and
Organizational
and
scale, do it
dish,
all.
yeah, dishwasher, and really just had a lot of fun, from the ground up, literally coffee shop on a napkin to building a facility and, taking the team in 2 years to a cup final. It was just a wonderful journey. So um yeah, and then that's kind of that's led me here.
To the USA head coach slash GM role. So
Yeah,
your organizational
absolutely.
scale, Scott, seems to continue with you everywhere you go. You're not just doing the one thing; you're doing multiple roles. So
Yeah, I think
at home, you do
yeah.
you cook the dinners, and then you also do the washing up. That's expectations in your household, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Oh, mate,
Yeah,
what a
yeah,
place to be in. What a place to be in.
yeah,
Righto, mate. Well, I think just the other bit which you didn't talk about, which we'll get to later, but just you were working in the tech industry whilst you were doing the bulk of all of those
yeah,
roles, right? For Oracle, which I
yeah,
think sometimes is, yeah, I think you play down how cool that role is.
yeah,
Like you were essentially in charge of 150 or so different facets of that organization, big role, lots of
yeah,
responsibilities on top of
yeah.
all the stuff you're doing with rugby. That's right.
Yeah, no, it was a great team and so many parallels. Great people. If you think about a really talented athlete and a PhD in data science, they're more alike than what you would imagine they are,
Is
right?
that right?
In terms of yeah, just in terms of very talented, good at what they do. You'll be amazed that there's rugby environments can be aggressive environments. Of course, they can also be collaborative, but you'd be amazed at the parallels. And I kind of found this sweet spot in leading a, kind of hardcore engineering, product management strategy within a business to sports teams, in that you can take what we call the daily training environment, which is wrapping everything around a player, and you can parallel that to what I call the DWE, which is the daily work environment. And you can actually work with, it matters when you start to go to people and say, "Well, how can I remove friction from your life?" And I know this sounds simple, but it makes sense in the rugby world. Can I get you a better chair? Is the monitor big enough at your desk? What can I do to get you training and development? Are you getting what you need from our development program? And kind of empowering the team to come up with themes and values and all the things that, so they're very relatable. And so I kind of slipped into this sweet spot of really just, learning about how to create high performance teams of highly talented people and focusing on alignment more than, more than being the expert, being the person who listens for alignment, pushes alignment, um, and rewards it across the board.
Mate, that's a powerful statement. Uh, Listens for alignment and pushes for it and rewards it. I mean, that's a one, two, three right there, Scott. I reckon. Like, just, but I think that's important. Just if we digress on this for it, just a dash. Like, the fact that you put listens for alignment before anything else, I think, is a really interesting concept, which I don't hear a lot of. Do you think that's the listening aspect is a really important first step in DWEs?
I think it is. I think there's depends on the timing in which you come into the role. So there are times when you come into a new organization. For example, I came into a leadership role and somebody was transitioning out. That was a very big listening time. And so I spent a while listening. You can't go for too long because at some point people need leadership and they want to hear from you. What's next? So I'd really kind of equivalent it to mining for gems, so to speak, right? Like
Yes.
you start on the surface of, hey, here's a big rock that I think we can all tackle and we can all get behind it. Usually, I found you needed to find that within the first kind of 30 days and say, okay, I've heard this a lot. let's recognize this is something that we can get after. So you kind of find that sweet spot of it's a big rock, but it's if I just change a couple things, it's easy to move, so I can show early success to get buy-in with the broader team, and then you start then you start digging from there.
Yeah.
And just keep kind of layering it in. So I think that's a huge part of it is the timing of it. And then I think there are times when you've been in a role for a while and maybe you need to move from being very transactional to more transformational, which is what I'm doing with the rugby program here. Our men's 15s is we've said 2025 is about being transformational. We've been transactional. We play games, we go to tournaments, we pick players, right?
Yes. So that's when you refer to transactional in a rugby setting, you're talking about the nuts and bolts, the game itself,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Like,
suppose.
you have 9 test matches a year and we're going to go play and we need to pick the guys by this. And we need to have, we need to do all these things to go play 9 test matches. We need this amount of money, etc. And you're just kind of living from year to year. But when you're transformational, you say, what are the pillars, what are the cross-cutting themes and things that we need to be doing to transform the way that we play and the way that the future teams are going to play? And for me, that was huge. And so at that point, in the beginning part of the year, it was kind of listening for the performance objectives from everybody within this organization. And so I listened and then I just really kind of synthesized that and came out and said, here are the 3 main performance objectives for us for this year. They're very high level. And then drove down into the individual pathways groups to the coaches, and the professional team and said, let's make sure we got alignment for what your objectives are inside of to the big objectives that we've set. And so that's kind of how the process, the cycle goes, so to speak. And then you put
Yeah.
governance in place. And then you have to have governance in place to circle back. That's what we do. Coach, we
Yeah.
review the review and go.
How do you step between those roles? Because you're head coach and GM. The transactional role, I would suggest, would be most coaches around the world would be locked in that transactional space. And we got X amount of
Yeah,
games this year. We do well every time. Rah rah. So how do you
right.
get that shift from, yeah, I know that stuff's there, but how, like what you're going into 2025, you're now going into transformational time. How do you shift your
Yeah.
sort of head coaching role to your GM role to those other things? How do you do that well?
Yeah. I think maybe I've been really lucky in that I had these roles in the technology industry where I might be sitting in a business strategy or a conversation one day, and the next day be in a very deep technical conversation with a software developer. And so you end up having um some habits around. Yeah, obviously you build some mental models around how you could do that. And then for me, it's about this intentional work blocks. And we think like the WTP is just for sport, but it's kind of, my life is a 7-day repeating WTP.
Oh,
There's
I'm loving all these letters, Scott. They're just WTPs, DWEs. I'm trying to write them all
yeah.
down and make points on what they all mean. It's outstanding.
Well, the WTP is weekly tactical periodization. That's the way you structure your week. And you got a fast day and you got a rest day and you got a contact day, right? And
Yep, yeah,
and
exactly
so,
right.
right. So that's the way I live my life. I have an alignment day, where we talk about across the pillars and we focus on that. And, we finish the day and with action and debrief the day and, try to close that out. And,
So
let,
you actually have days where you say this is my action day. This is my you actually have whole days you set out and say, this is what I'm doing. This is my tone of my being today is X. And then
yeah,
tomorrow will be the flip and Y. And then I'll have a merger day
yeah,
where it might be half X, half Y, half Z, something like that.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what I might do is on a Monday, I'll have a specific day, which is all about my one-on-ones across the organization with the teams.
Mm.
And then if I can wrap it up that day, great. If not, then I set it on, and before 10 a.m. on Tuesday, I make sure that I close out any actions that I had as a result of that. So, you know,
So your policy is one-on-ones on Mondays, and then by 10 o'clock Tuesday, you reflect overnight and come back and you tidy up any outstanding loose threads, and then you bin that aspect. Right, now we're on to Tuesday, which
yeah,
is a different mindset.
yep, yeah, yeah, exactly. And then you move into what Tuesday is, and you go from there. And the beauty of international rugby is when you're in camp, right? And
Yeah.
so when you're out of camp, your time is spent, at least for me, is built on preparing for, but also building the processes and enabling the other folks in the organization to be able to do their role when I'm gone for 5 weeks, and do it with 1 hour of interaction with me during those weeks. And so that's where the one-on-ones are so critical, because they become so rich over time. They start with a check-in and how you are, to solving business problems or performance problems in real time. And you flex between supporting the person and being there for them, to having one-on-ones that are focused on performance review, but also one-on-ones that are focused on execution. And I think that's important.
Mm. Well, I think it's really, it's probably a missed thought process around your one-on-ones are there for the times you're not there. I like that statement which you referred to that, like when you're having those one-on-ones, you're very present and you're all about then. But the bigger picture aspect to it, as I understand you talking about, is when you're not there, in that time that you were there, you've given them some of the tools and the love and support and that side of things. So when you're not there, they're better equipped to deal and know what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah, that's a lovely flip
Yeah,
because often the transactional nature of coaches and certainly at a professional level, your Monday is your one-on-one, but sometimes it's nothing more than that then and there. But if you're thinking bigger picture for that transformational
yeah,
piece, you're actually putting in
yeah,
stuff which is going to make them better people, right? And better athletes and better
yeah,
tech and engineers and all that
yeah,
stuff. Ah, love it, mate. Love it. That's a cool, slight twist. I love it. Now,
yeah.
Scott, with these experiences that you've had, it's wonderful. You have a very different outlook compared to most traditional rugby coaches who probably don't have the business background that you have. How then would you define culture? It's sometimes it's a word that's loosely said and said often, but we don't always spend the time to actually sort of define its meaning. From your background with your tech and engineering stuff and your rugby and your growing the ground up builds on the life program, on the U20s, on the ATLs, how would you define it?
It's a tough question. I don't have triggers. I tend to study stoicism, but culture is a trigger word for me, I think. um, it,
And in what way? And what you mean? It just rolls you up, or what about it is the trigger?
it's just kind of like, well, what do you really mean there? And I think that's the heart of your question, is what do you mean culture? And
Mm,
I think there's, if you want to define it, it's, first of all, it starts with who am I? What is my identity in this, and what space do I fill in this? And you have to live whatever you want to be within your organization. It's very tough, but you gotta live it. People are very good at seeing when you don't act in alignment with the principles and the values that are stated and public in your organization. So I think, first and foremost, I think it starts there. I think it's then, if you think about Daniel Kim's model around how he says, if you get the big rocks right, if you get your values, if you get your strategy, if you get your communication right, and you get your leadership right, then the one-off actions either align or don't align to that. And you're able to tell straight away whether they align or they don't. And that for me defines I refer to it more as the identity of the organization. And, and when I talk to players in the United States, we talk about being a internationally capped player is not something you just do. It's who you are. It needs to be an identity. You need to change the way you think about your life to be aligned with achieving that goal. Now, that will run against popular opinion because you'll say, well, if you make a mistake in sport, is your identity shot? That's not what we mean. We're not attacking anybody's mental health there. What we're saying is what we're saying is you need to live the process, so to speak. And that's why I call it kind of the identity of the organization. It's the things that if you walk in, it's very clear what you hear. What do you see? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Uh, that is the identity. I guess you could call that culture as well.
Yeah, I love it because you often hear people talk about the process over outcome, that chestnut which is repeated ad nauseum at times, but that concept of live the
Yeah,
process is actually refreshing. Like live the process every
yeah,
day, not something you do. It's who you are. Which I think you're
yeah,
right, Scott. I reckon a lot of people, particularly high end rugby coaches, might question that in regard to the being able to switch on, switch off. However, you
yeah.
make the point that it is that process, like it's a high performance process piece, isn't it? If you want to be
I
fantastic,
think
that's
it
how it
is.
has
I
to
mean,
be.
I think so. I mean, if you think about the roots of uh, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I had a son who had some challenges, and we went through it with him. And at the end of the day, what I realized with my son was it wasn't about me correcting him as his father. It was about me finding the habits and then showing him that he has a good day when he follows his habits, when he eats well, when he sleeps well, when he cleans his room. When he does those things, he is then at his best. And that's kind of the heart of it is what are those habits? And that's what I'm really after is kind of the behaviors and living those. And a behavior can be switch off. I'm at my best when I switch off every Thursday from 10 to 2,
Is
right?
that in
That
is that in the weekly schedule, Scott? Thursdays 10 till 2 is Scott's switch down
no,
time.
no,
We're watching Squid Game on Netflix.
no, yeah, there's definitely some what I call digital Sabbaths where there's some no electronics, that's in the week, but I think that's the point. It's like you live the process.
Man, I absolutely love it, mate. I think it's refreshing to hear that, and a lot of the stuff is told numerous times in sort of self help books and business stuff, but it's not always equated to rugby and sport in general. I think there's a belief that top athletes sort of have that, but I would argue that most don't. They've got where they are because they just love the game and they get good at it. And then if you can
Yeah,
double down on that natural love and enjoyment of the game and the fact that they're so into it with complementing habits, which will
yeah,
supersize them, is a cool
yeah,
concept and one that we
yeah,
probably miss. But some of those habits are not habits necessarily, which are rugby related habits. They're just good life
correct.
habits, correct?
Yeah,
So in that regard, you're not talking about sort of the X's and O's specifically of rugby, but it's specifically of being a better person in yourself. Like the stuff that you're doing with your block in your week is essentially what
yeah,
any aspiring high performance athlete should be doing for their life in order to maximize them, right?
yeah, yeah.
Love it.
What you do for a living is could be picking up a ball, or it could be you know talking into this laptop right now. Um, but
Or doing
but
all the numbers in behind the laptop which make it work,
yeah,
Scott. Or
it-
those at the nerdery.
that's it, absolutely. And but the concepts are the same, right? When we're on what we're doing, whether you love your work that you do, that's your purpose. It doesn't matter you want to be on and you want to be at your best when you're doing that. That's when when you really truly enjoy it. And so, the habits are immutable, so to speak.
I love it. Now, mate, one habit which I really enjoyed over the past couple of years is regular check-ins with yourself over this, just to chew the fat on themes and stories. And I really loved when you got the job, the American head coach job, well deserved. And you don't have to look very far around the country to know that it's really well received. Like you're the guy that should be. I think it's really important too that just to note, since 1976, there's been 17 head coaches of the USA, and only 5 have been American. And that's something which is, I think, is really cool about yourself. Is not only have you played for the team, you're from here, you've made your own track in this regard and been really successful along the way, and then to get rewarded with the top job is fantastic for an organizational piece. But it is well deserved. But also knowing you, I know how passionate you are about American rugby in general, and I loved what you were doing with the pride in the team, and a lot of your theming and your environmental stuff and some of the processes that you talked about is about creating stories and themes for the team, the boys to hook onto. Would you be able to share whatever's appropriate to share, which is not secret to the team, about some of the themings and imagery which you're trying to generate more than just better rugby players, but you're trying to sell the grow the love of the American rugby team.
Yeah, we started with an aspiration really, which turned into a vision, which then turned into a plan, which was, to be in a quarterfinal at home in 2031 in the World Cup. And when we started to peel that apart and look at the stages in which we needed to move through to have a chance at doing that, really resonated with the space program with us. And so, in 1962, JFK gave a speech in Rice University and said we were going to go to the moon. And, we're going to go to the moon within this decade, right? We
Yeah,
do this and
love
the
it.
other things,
Yeah.
right? So he said, we're going to do that. And that was in 1962 and 1969. We put, the first man on the moon. Now that was 7 years. It's 7 years from 2024 when we came up with this to 2031. That was the first parallel.
And the stars were aligning.
Yeah, exactly.
From the outset.
And I think the main thing that we really tapped into is around the role of the current eagle and their job to inspire the generation that will play in that World Cup. Some of them that are now coming in are young enough that they will play in that. But the group that was senior, they were preparing for a 2023 World Cup. They weren't planning on seeing a 2027. And we just had them think about and visualize standing in the tunnel of a SoFi Stadium in LA before a World Cup quarterfinal with their families and their coaches and their friends and the smoke and the flames. And they walk out of the tunnel and they look up and it says USA versus whoever World Cup quarterfinal. And I said, man, is that a vision you want? And of course they say, yes, man, I'd love that. And I say, if you could give that to somebody else, would you give that gift?
Oh,
And
yeah.
if and if if you are willing to give that gift, because I tell them I am. I'm gonna, you rattled off the number of coaches that have been here, right? My chances of me being here for 2031 are whatever percentage rugby coaches get, right? And their jobs. But for me, it was about establishing what they were going to do now and how hard they were going to work for each other and how they were going to present an example to the rest of our country around what it means. And when we talk about an astronaut were the best of what America could produce. They were athletes, they were physicists, they were mathematicians, they were incredible people, the very first astronauts. And the USA Eagles, win-loss record, whatever aside, are the best of what America can produce in our sport. And so when I talk about I tie back to the identity. That's the identity of what we call Ego 365, which is you are an eagle 365 days a year. And that is what you do. That is who you are. And then we shape the behaviors around that. And when I say we, that means the senior players shape that. They define that. They share that within the team. Uh, and I think
Are you there?
that
Are
is
you there? Are
important
you
for us.
there? Sorry, Scott. Are you just there to, like you said earlier, there to, uh, that you're there to push that alignment, that consistency, and then reward it. That's your job on that. But once you've listened and implemented, then it's just to keep pushing, and keep rewarding when
Yep.
there's the behaviors that you wanted to see are happening. Reward that.
Yeah, and as you know, take the time to review, right? I mean, we call it a 1 in 60. So 1 in 60 means if, it's a piloting term around staying on course. It's when 1 degree off, you'll be 60 nautical miles off course. So we talk about 1 in 60. So it's about like coming back and checking, are we headed in the right direction, and then are we aligned to that? And so because the course will change, you put these things in place and the team starts to grow, and then you go, we're ready to go to the next level, this we can do more. And then so then it's about redefining and getting with your team leadership around what is that more, and what does that look like. And then I know this is completely off the wall. I don't know if it's just crazy or if it really worked, but we paired up players with members of our coaching and operational staff. And we had them go through and say, the operational staff, sit down with them and talk about your journey, from the time you get your notification of invite to getting your plane ticket, to getting your kit, to going to the game. Like, I want you to hear from each other what the desired experience is from the player, and then the player understanding what the operational challenge is, all that goes into making that work. And that is completely different than any rugby methodology. They say, keep the players box small, don't let them, but it's a short period of time. It's a 2-day thing, and we drill in, and then what happens is what you have this person that's in the leadership group, inevitably you're moving 50 people around the world, something goes wrong, inevitably, right? And that
Mm.
person goes, guys, no problem. Look, let's do this. Let's just roll with this. These things happen. I know why, and now you don't have this like, you don't have players making up their own stories around why your luggage is taking 2 hours to check in instead of one. Right. So it's really, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just like I remember watching the when Elon Musk was doing the space rocket tests when they were failing. One of the things that struck me when I saw some of those documentaries was how committed every single operational staff person throughout that entire organization was to achieving the mission of these self-returning rockets. And when that didn't
Yeah.
work, the whole organization was down. Like I remember seeing a scene where there was like people who presumably were just sort of facility maintenance people, but they were so invested. They were
Yeah.
all connected. They were aligned to this
Yeah.
mission that they were on, that they cared. And you knew that just looking at those scenes that this is one connected thing. And there's no surprise that when it did fail, how quickly they were able to, right, adjust, make the fixes, move on, be better.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like
Yeah.
everyone went like that. And that sounds like kind of the thing that you're trying to achieve with your wider group in this operationals mixing with the players. Would that be bang on?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think and it goes, across operational and other functions. But I think the thing is what we call kind of plus one mindset. Today can either be plus one or minus one for you, right? And that plus one mindset is just around, working to problem solve. When you engage not every player, but your leadership group in the operations of the team, at least have an understanding. They are allies in solving the problem. Uh,
When you
you
when
know,
you
and I,
when you created the story like around the astronauts, and it just fitted so well, right? You mentioned there you don't have to get everyone on board, you just have to get the leadership crew, right? So did you have
yeah.
resistance to it, or do you have people that went, or on the whole was it just a seamless, people saw it, loved it, went, yeah,
Yeah.
and just bought in?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it probably took a couple weeks because people are like, "What the heck is this?" Right? There's
Yeah.
always a bit of that. I think when we described the vision for the team, then they could relate it to the to the mission, so to speak. And then as we got deeper into it and we started to assign a mission badge to a game and giving somebody a badge for, if they were in the buildup, if they prepared, every staff member, every player receives a mission badge, a recognition of their contribution to the game. Um, you start to do those things and then they start to go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then you just kind of keep layering it in. So you talk about the actual mission. What is the mission? What are they trying to achieve in Mercury in this mission? How, and so you just got to keep kind of just, they good religion is repetition. And so you just kind of keep repeating the message.
Good religion is repetition. That's awesome. I think also, Scott, I think it's important just to recount that just knowing you, and when you're talking about the astronauts were the best of the perfect mix. So I actually reckon that's very similar to you in itself. You're a very intelligent man, excellent rugby coach. You've got all this other facets to your life. You live your values, like you are the first one that you talk about those habits and the organization of your habits. I think that's you. So I think when you sell or get up and speak about this is the thing, I think because you are a living endorsement of the things you're preaching, I think when you get up and say it, people go, yeah, okay. And I think that's probably the first step in as being a good leader and the culture you want, that you've got to live the values which you're then going to be espousing on the rest. And if you do that, any story you tell, people know, well, if Scott's saying this, I know he's done all the work in the background. He's lived all this stuff. I'm in. And that's how it rolls. And there's no wavering when people think about yourself and then the stories you then say afterwards. So as any coach, that to live it first. And if you're not those things, probably be a little bit tentative around saying for everyone to be those things if you're not quite those. Maybe
Yeah.
mold your story to be something slightly out.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if you get to become a leader as a coach, it's not in every case, but in most cases, you've gotten there in some way and you're passionate about something, or a number of things. And that's why you got into coaching. And so I think it's important that the the values or the stories or the themes that you tell genuinely get you excited. And if they don't get you excited, to get yourself excited.
Mm.
What I mean by that is like this year, 2025 is World Cup qualification. And I share with the players that every morning I wake up for 2 minutes and I visualize how happy they're going to be. And me standing back and looking at this team that accomplished World Cup qualification when they did in 2023. And I can feel the cardboard from the sign in my hands and see the smiles on their faces. And that's what, and that's what gets me up in the morning. That fires me up. And I think, that's what I mean by if you if you don't believe it, find yourself, create a vision for yourself, see your team accomplishing it, see yourself being a part of it, and and then live it.
Love it. And just out of interest, I think I know the answer here, but you've mapped out all the missions from now all the way till 2031 in terms of each moon landing, or just the next couple of seasons. What have you got there?
We just we did it in stages. So there was, three projects. There was Mercury, there was Gemini, and then there was Apollo, which ultimately went to the moon. So Mercury was my first year with the team. And Mercury was about right vehicles, right people, right infrastructure. And so we did that. We got those things in place. And then at the Eagles level, we tied that to respect and reputation for ourselves in the Eagles and the team and the environment. And now we're into Gemini. So if you think about Mercury, it was really relatable to that group because we said the Mercury astronauts, they didn't go to the moon. They did all the work, set it up for the Apollo astronauts to go. And, what was their goal? Their goal was to get into space, and it was to go a little higher, a little faster, and orbit more times around the Earth. So it's about getting into zero gravity. So we talk about our game and the way we react is zero G. It's free, and how do you get there? How do you get there? You have to fight, right? You have to fight the negativity of gravity that pulls you down. You have to fight towards this vision of someday we're going to go to the moon. But first, I'm just going to get up and go a little higher, a little faster, and be in zero gravity. So that was kind of like that was the first set of missions. And then as you look at the space program and you look at Gemini, now they were starting to do cool stuff in space so they could get there. And now they were starting to assemble pieces and how are we going to get the vehicles together that are going to take us there? Again, still not going to the moon, but it was about bringing the big pieces together. That's our focus for the next 3 years is being very intentional with our performance objectives and in how we use our portfolio spending and investment into players and infrastructure to make sure that we start to put the pieces together. That ultimately involves a 2027 World Cup appearance and a good showing there.
Love it. Now, I'm feeling the excitement just listening to you. I'm getting wrapped up. I want to be part of it. But is there a stress side to the stuff as well? Like as a coach, the excitement's always there, but do you get any sort of stresses from you in your roles, not just the head coaching role, but do you get what stresses pop up for you and how do you deal with those? Because it's not all fun times. You've got to have some bad weather as well. What aspects of your leadership uh, causes that stress and how do you deal with it?
I think the biggest thing, particularly on the international stage, when you're transforming a team, so you've got this transitionary period of players rolling out, is that in your head, the process, regardless of wins and losses, is happening. Or it's not happening and you're trying to make it happen, right? But
Yeah.
you're seeing the incremental steps, right? You're seeing the incremental steps and you understand the plan. But you've got as with any coach, right? You've got a boss that says, "Oh, it doesn't matter. You lost the test match,"
Mm.
and you go, but no, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
You lost the test match. So I think I wouldn't say it's a stress. I think it's a reality for me. I tend to try to look at things neutrally for what they really are and say, this may get cut short. What I'm trying to achieve and what the team's trying to achieve. And I don't want it to get cut short, not because of me. I'm retired from technology. I'm okay for the rest of my life. I think it's more for the players and the journey that they're on. It's that, if this ends, it's gonna be negative for the players and the coaches that are bought into this thing and that are going forward. So I think, the stress of the week and the performance, you look at the Eagles this year, we used 47 players in 9 test matches,
Yeah.
and that's pretty that's a big number,
That's a big number.
for us and
Do you
yeah,
do
so
you
the results.
Do you think
Yeah.
that some of that, like when you're weathering, because all coaches weather this, where external parties come in who are emotional, they watch the game, they want to see a win, and if they don't see a win, they get emotional, and there's the kickback, and they're not seeing, like you talked about,
Yeah.
those incremental improvements, which is what most transformational coaches are looking for. So how have you been able to upward manage those people? I'd imagine in your business career, that's been a big part of it as well. That upward manage those people at that level. And what advice
Yeah.
would you give coaches around how they can be better at selling that story to those emotional types on the sideline?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think um we had a change in leadership within the governing body, when I came in. So, if it's kind of one, getting the time and the space to take all of what we've said in the last hour down to a 2-minute conversation. This is Moonshot. This is the vision. These are the stages to it. This is what to expect. And this is what to expect in the next week. And this is what to expect in the next 6 months and to expect in the next year from me. And then being really good about circling back and saying, "Hey, look, you know, we're at the end of the 6 months. This is what was achieved. This wasn't achieved. And this is the plan going forwards." I think when just like players, coaches, administrators, when they get under pressure, you can go in and try and solve it yourself. You could think about it a little bit too much and and uh and ruminate on it. And I think the important thing is to is just that constant stream of communication, good or bad, whatever comes back on the other side of it, as long as you're looking at it neutrally and giving the next step. I think that is, at least for your own peace of mind, that's important. And I had a boss when I first started in the corporate world that said something to me that I've used every time. And he said, whenever there's a problem, don't come to me with the problem. Come to me with, what's the problem? What have you done so far? What are you going to do next? And what do you need from me? And as long as so that framework stuck with me. And I think that's the way to do good upward management is, yep, this is a problem. I recognize it. This is what I'm going to do. I really need your support in this area right now.
I think that's a lovely little framework, Scott. Absolutely awesome, mate. Like, Scott, mate, this hour has flown by. I can't even believe it's been an hour. It's not quite, so we've got time for one more. But I actually, just reflecting now already, Scott, your analogies from the corporate world has been phenomenal. And I just, there's such a seamless crossover. A lot of the stuff you're saying, I'm finding it intriguing. And I think I could argue that there's a miss there for sports coaches in general who haven't been exposed to the pressures and lifestyles of the corporate stuff, because all of this stuff is great. I just love then how you said not only coming full circle on sort of like players performance wise or week to week, but coming full circle on that upward management in 6 months' time, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, checking in with the key stakeholders just to let them know and show them and revisit the things you said, and giving them the confidence in you that you are on track and doing what you said is great, mate. And I think sometimes we miss that as coaches, bringing it back to what you said at the start, because we're so transactional. We just want to perform on the weekend, but we miss that bigger piece. And I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
people out here, mate, that'll be listening to this that will just take a note of some of your detail, which you get assigned to you a lot, that detail, but putting things into a diary and doing it. I think it's great. The last question I want to leave with you, mate, and you have sort of mentioned it, one example of it, but I love to hear this question. Is there a particular coaching belief or principle that you hold that you suspect many of your peers would challenge or disagree with? And I know earlier you mentioned the one about asking players to live 365, be the eagle. But is there something else which you've dwelled on, which you think is worthy of sharing to just stir people's imaginations?
Boy, I wish I had something really insightful to say about the future of the game, or something like that. But I I think it I think it comes down to, I got really concerned when I started to work with some very successful coaches. Maybe not concerned, but I didn't agree with um just, I agree with the fact that players need to make fast decisions. Therefore, the less decisions that they make, the faster, and the more models they build, the more decisions they can make, and ultimately influence the game. But I think that education of players and bringing them into the strategy portion, to having um that breadth, I think is important. One of the things that we've kind of said here is, I say, a good team is like cooking a really great breakfast, in that you need meatheads and you need eggheads.
Well, it's lucky most families are pretty well blessed with a bit of a mixture, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you think about that, as it's, you want people to think deeply about the game and your team, and you want to intellectually challenge them and stimulate them and help them develop in that way. And there's some players who their strengths lie elsewhere. And I don't know if that's a challenge, but I think it came across to me as very binary, in that, keep the box small. This is what they do. And I thought, there's more to it than that. A team is a team. They're just playing a game on the field at that time, and teams need leaders, and they need people to see around corners, and I think that's important.
Mm. Don't keep the box small.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, like, what a pleasure. What a pleasure, my friend. It's lovely chatting. It's always a pleasure chatting to you, but certainly when we're doing it in this context with a real purpose behind it, I've really enjoyed it. And I've actually loved hearing your background as well. And it's easy to see, mate, like coming from the Midwest where humility and hard work was the norm and the service mindset was instilled in such a young age. And then going through all your stuff with the nerdery, I think that's important, which seems to shape you a lot. And certainly the way you talk and enjoy yourself when you're talking is great, mate. But your theming, your messaging, the way you run your cultures, I'm really pumped to see the future of American rugby. And I know the American public is pumped too, because it's a wider culture that has every right to love this game because it resonates so much with the psyche of Americans. The values, the contest, the look after your mates. It's so ingrained in American culture that it's about when it goes big, it'll go really big. So thank you for today, my friend.
Yeah.
Go well on all your journeys and hit the moon and a little bit further.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.